Hi, welcome back to the next installment from Z-fari, the zombie novel. Today we're going to read the first part of chapter 14. So get comfortable, take off your shoes, kick back, find a refreshing beverage to enjoy, and we'll get started. Here we go. The next day was Monday. Ike and BB began by taking sandbags, a couple of extra shotguns, and boxes of shells, rope, and the flamethrower to the post office. They dropped the supplies off in front of the building. No one was going to steal anything, and the Donaldson's goons could lug all that to the roof. They continued loading sandbags into the bed of the pickup and taking them to Peck until the pile in front of the post office must have contained more than 100. Sergeant Emily Earhart decided to go to the station gym after work. She had brought her gym bag to work with her. She had filled it with vibrantly colored abstract print leggings, a comfortable and well-worn gray tank, her purple sports bra, a pair of Asics gel cross trainers, a pair of white socks, and a little towel to wipe the sweat she intended to work up. She changed in the locker room and headed straight for the treadmills. She stood next to an available treadmill and did 6 ankle circles with each leg, then moved on to 15 leg swings, following this with the same number of figure-8 leg swings. Then she stood with her hand on her hips, and with her feet hip-width apart, bent her knees slightly and rotated her hips in both directions 10 times. Finally, she did 10 slow backward arm circles. She hopped onto the treadmill, walked for 3 minutes, and then jogged for 3 minutes more. Then she kicked up the treadmill speed to 7 miles an hour. After a mile, she increased the incline to 1%. After another mile to 2%. One more mile at 3%, and then a cool down. When the treadmill stopped, she grabbed her towel and wiped herself off. "You're pretty serious about this, aren't you?" a familiar male voice said. "Trooper Reed, hi," Emily said, feeling a little flustered that he had been watching her run and sweat. "Where are you headed next?" he asked. "I think that I should lift something heavy on the machines. I have a usual routine, even though I haven't been to this gym in a while," she said. "I like the machines. Horizontal seated leg press, lat pull down biceps bar, triceps pull down, chest press, leg raises, and finish with the rowing machine. Do you mind if I tag along?" Britt Reed's smile and blue eyes helped her decide. "If you can keep up," her bright smile challenged him. They spent an hour sweating together in the gym, working hard and laughing with the enjoyment of the physical challenge and the good company. When they had finished their circuits, Britt asked, "Can I take you somewhere for some water?" Emily laughed again. "I think that we've sweated enough to earn ourselves a beer." "Yes, ma'am," Britt said. "And for tonight, my name is Emily," she said, wiping the towel around her neck and over her forearms. "And tonight, my name is Britt, Emily," he said. "I'll meet you out front after I shower." "Good idea, Britt," she replied. "I'll be just a few minutes." On Monday, Willie had recuperated enough to attempt part 2 of phase 3, biting of abdomen and thorax. The cell for phase 4 would be ready on Wednesday, and regardless of the shape Willie was in then, phase 4 would begin. Dr. MacDougall called up to the ready room and requested 6 troopers for the next part of phase 3. Then he turned to Alice, or whatever her name was, and said, "Please recline Willie's chair to the horizontal position and then wrap him in the Kevlar, across his shoulders just above the biceps and up and over his head, leaving his nose and eyes uncovered. You should be able to do that by yourself. When the troopers arrive, have one of them help you wrap him in the Kevlar from the points of his hip bones down to his feet. You want to protect everywhere but the target area, to help the zombie focus on where we want him to bite." Allison inwardly shook her head, but hurried over to the cabinets on the wall and pulled out the Kevlar wrap. It was about 3 inches wide and self-adhering. Allison suspected that Dr. MacDougall had been shopping in the Amazon.com bondage department again. She smiled to herself, wondering if he had gotten it prime. She walked to the restraint chair and whispered half to herself, "Come on, Willie boy, time for another zombie date." She adjusted the chair so that Willie was laid out flat, still tightly restrained. She dutifully tightened the restraints for the new position. Then she loosened the restraints that held Willie's upper chest, neck, and head. Willie was too weak to do anything but moan quietly. Allison wrapped Willie quickly but efficiently. By the time she was through, Willie looked like a shiny black mummy with a pasty big white nose and 2 sad, helpless eyes. The troopers arrived. Allison called the first one over to help her. As she retightened the restraints that held Willie's shoulders, neck, and head, she instructed the trooper to loosen the straps that immobilized Willie's feet, ankles, knees, thighs, and hips. When he got to Willie's knees, Allison called a second trooper over to help in case Willie decided to attempt to kick or squirm out of control. It did take both troopers to lift and control Willie while Allison wrapped him in the Kevlar. She began with his feet and carefully and fastidiously swathed his feet and ankles and calves and knees and thighs, and finally his hips in the sturdy fabric. Then, as the troopers held his legs motionless, she tightened the restraints one more time. Now it was time to prepare Jerry, the zombie, for his part in the trial. The troopers pulled on the bite-resistant arm guards and gloves. Two of the troopers went over to the cabinets and fiddled around in drawers, looking for what they would need. When they found a strange assortment of paraphernalia that had probably been designed for a dominatrix dungeon, they each brought an armload to the zombie chair. Then the four big men moved to flank the zombie's chair. First, one trooper loosened the straps that held the zombie's right arm. A second trooper reached down into the pile of equipment and found a length of rope that ended in a noose. He slipped the noose over the zombie's wrist and pulled it tight. The trooper held the zombie's right arm out straight, almost rigid. Then the first trooper loosened the straps and held Jerry's left arm, and a third trooper repeated the lassoing and immobilization of the zombie's left arm. The first trooper then loosened the straps that held the zombie's stomach, chest, and shoulders, neck, and head. After instructing the two troopers controlling the zombie's arms to pull, he moved to the back of the chair and adjusted some knobs and levers that allowed the chair back to become vertical. The zombie was now held in a sitting position. The first trooper then bent down and searched through the equipment, finding a wide belt-like thing. It was beautifully made of Bordeaux leather outside, with a black glove leather lining and gold-plated buckles and D-rings. The trooper looked at it for a minute dumbly, and Dr. MacDougall shouted out, "It's a waist cuff, you moron! Put it around his waist and cinch it up. The buckles are locking buckles, so when you get them tight, they will hold. Clip the reins to the D-rings in the back so that you can hold the zombie from there." Once Dr. MacDougall explained what he intended, the trooper quickly got the hang of it. Each rein, "Oh God, Dr. MacDougall," Allison wondered to herself, "what the hell have you been up to?" had a swivel snap on each end and a loop sewn into the leather at the other end. There were two. The trooper attached the reins and pulled them on them, testing. The zombie could be controlled. MacDougall walked over to the troopers and the zombie, pulled on the ropes and the reins, and said, "Alice, have you adjusted the cameras?" Allison nodded, and MacDougall said to the troopers, "Bring the zombie to the test subject. Do not let it get closer than 2 feet until I tell you." Dr. MacDougall moved over to Willie, examined the wrappings, and removed Jerry's ball gag. Then he pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He scrolled through his apps and spoke softly into the phone. He pushed on the screen and then put the phone back into his pocket. "When I tell you, please give the ropes and the reins enough slack so that the zombie can reach anywhere on Willie's body that is not covered by the Kevlar. I do not want it biting him anywhere except the exposed skin. Is that clear, gentlemen?" The troopers answered with a ragged, "Yes, sir." "Good," he said, and moved over to the cameras, checking them for focus and picture quality. He nodded his approval to Allison and moved about 4 feet beyond Willie's head. "Begin," Dr. MacDougall commanded. As the troopers let their ropes and reins lengthen to allow the zombie to get nearer and nearer to Willie, the only sound in the room was a strange muffled ululation, a soft whining lamentation from the bundled man. The zombie pulled more and more strongly against its ties as it managed to get nearer and nearer to Willie. With a fierce pull, the zombie lunged at Willie's chest, sinking its incisors into Willie's right pectoral muscle. Willie made a sound that began as human and became something less than that. Jerry rent Willie's flesh and the muscle in a vicious harrowing that sent blood and lymph and chunks of Willie flying around the lab. The zombie let a large chunk of Willie's chest fall to the floor as it seemed to notice Willie's belly out of the corner of its eye. The zombie sunk its teeth into Willie again, just above its navel. It bit and bit and bit him again, finally causing a large enough wound for it to reach Willie's intestines. The zombie sank its teeth into Willie again, pushing its head as deeply into Willie as it could, and a second later pulling its head up, arching its back, and shaking its gory head with part of Willie's intestine hanging from its mouth. "That's enough," Dr. MacDougall shouted. The troopers were stunned by the carnage. "Enough!" MacDougall shouted again. "Pull the zombie back!" The troopers finally responded and pulled. Slowly, the 6 troopers' strength proved to be more than the zombies, and the zombie was slowly, very slowly pulled away from the terribly ravaged man. "Alice," Dr. MacDougall ordered, "help the troopers restrain the zombie and then come here and help me with the subject." It took Alice and all 6 of the troopers about 10 minutes of intense struggle to secure the zombie in its chair. The terrible biting of Willie had animated this zombie, and its new aroused strength was astonishing and dangerous. If it hadn't been for the ropes and reins that constrained it, the 7 living beings would have been no match for it. But they finally succeeded. Allison walked to Dr. MacDougall and waited for his next directive. She did not have long to wait. First, he spat out, get the custodians in here and clean this place up. It looks like an abattoir instead of a lab. When your cube is finished, you sick bastard, thought Allison, your slaughterhouse will look like a lab. But she wisely kept her thoughts to herself. Take the Kevlar off the subject and treat him for shock, liquids and antibiotics, the same protocol that we used previously. He seems to go into shock at the slightest provocation, Dougal opined contemptuously. Then put a couple of stitches in that intestine. And when you're finished with that, upload the videos and still photos from the trial. I will transcribe my own notes. Allison would have liked an ethics committee to look into those notes. She promised herself that if she ever had the opportunity, she would make copies, one for her insurance, one for the AMA, one for the National Institute of Health, one for the WHO, and one for the New York fucking Times. She nodded and walked to the phone and called the custodians, cautioning them to wear hazmat coveralls. After she hung up, she turned to Dr. MacDougall and said, I've gotten my HPV vaccination, but I'm going directly to the decontamination shower now. I will be back after I finish and put on new clothes. These that I'm wearing I will put into the incinerator. You should do the same. The doctor replied in a snippy voice, well, that's a waste of time. We already know that zombification is not a product of blood-borne pathogens, or Willie would have been undead a week ago. But they're your clothes. Burn them as you like. Allison was tempted to say something, but she held her tongue. She returned in 20 minutes, her hair wet but feeling much better. She set to unwrapping and restraining Willie and setting up the appropriate IVs. She began to unload the video and photographic data from the trial, but was interrupted by the custodians. They had finished, they told her. Allison wanted to examine their work before she signed off on it. That took her another hour, but she was finally satisfied that they had done a satisfactory job. They always did. They were a thoroughly professional outfit. Willie was now barely alive. Jerry the zombie had never looked better. He had never looked worse, either. He still looked like a zombie, dripping a smelly mix of urine and feces on the floor of the lab.